predicted paper. And I know there's going to be a lot of tension building up and everything, anxiety and fear. But see, you have to create that balance to solve the paper in calm, and you have to relax yourself before giving the exam. Okay? So just focus on the revision right now, and everything is going to be fine. Don't let that tension, overcome you, overwhelm you. Just relax, focus. And I'm going to share one more paper after this today itself. So I believe that these papers will help you out tomorrow a lot, and they have actually, fill those gaps that you had in your in time revision. So you might find some of the questions which might be related to them, but this will definitely be a good start for your last minute revision. Okay, so without further wasting any time, let's start. First question: complete the sentence about the nervous system. The brain and spinal cord form the central nervous system, and the nerves coming into and out of the spinal cord are part of the peripheral nervous system. So, just a briefing, I'm telling you that nervous system here has two parts, CNS and PNS. CNS basically is your like brain and spinal cord, and the way that they are connected with each other with the help of neurons and your nerves actually form the part of PNS. B part. Figure 1.1 shows part of the human eye and the three neurons that conduct electrical impulses between eye and the brain. These neurons are involved in pupil reflex. Okay. State the type of neuron. So the type of neuron which we have to label here is A and B. So this is A and this is your B. So A I have labeled is a motor neuron because it is going to the iris. So a motor neuron basically goes to the effector, and that is why it is a motor neuron. And B here is a relay neuron because it is at the junction of both motor and sensory. And this one is a sensory neuron because it has the cell body in between. Triple I. Write the correct letters to complete the reflex arc. So as you know, reflex arc basically it starts from the receptor, then your sensory neuron, then your motor neuron, relay neuron, then motor neuron, and finally to the effector. So let's go up. Okay. So it's starting from J. J is basically your retina, and retina has the rod cells which detect the change in light intensity. Now, from this retina, it is going to be carried by your sensory neuron. Just another information I would like to give you here, this sensory neuron is actually present in your optic nerve. So the optic nerve actually carries this sensory neuron. Then there is B, relay neuron, finally the motor neuron A, and then coming back to the muscles of the iris, which is the effector. So this is the complete reflex arc. Moving ahead to the next part, that is your table 1.1 shows the names of some parts of the eye, their function, and the letters in figure 1.1 that identify the parts of the eye. Okay, so this is the complete table. Let's talk about them. So this is first one is suspensory ligament. So let me just show you what is suspensory ligament here. So the G that you're seeing here is basically the suspensory ligament. Now, those who don't know, I'm telling you this, suspensory ligament basically controls the shape of the lens, which is also called as your accommodation. Controlling the shape of the lens based on the position of the object is accommodation. So this lens, it becomes thick and fat when actually the object is closer, and the same lens, it actually becomes more thin and long when the object is far away. So what I've written here is the suspensory ligaments slacken to make the lens thick or more convex. Okay, and the correct answer is G. Now the next one is it contracts in response to bright light. Since we just did a pupil reflex, so you know that when there is bright light at that time, the pupil is actually going to constrict, and in that case, which muscles are going to contract? It's going to be your circular muscles. So circular muscles contract at that time, and the letter is E. Okay, letter basically is present in your iris, so that's E. Then next one is cornea. Simple function of cornea is that it refracts the light because obviously the medium is changing when the light rays are traveling, so it refracts the light, and that's going to be your D. Okay, here. And the next one here that we have here is contains high density of cones for colored vision, and that's fovea. J, because we did not have any proper other labeling than this. So it is basically pointing to fovea. So this area is actually a fovea. And those who don't know, I'm telling you, I will mark it with black. So you remember this. This is your blind spot. Here in the blind spot, there are no rods and cones. In the fovea, there are densely packed cone cells. Sharpest image is produced here. And in this region, that is your blind spot, is actually where there is no rods and cone cells, because this is the place where the optic nerve leaves for the brain. So this is a quick review of this part. If you need any further help, you can just get in touch with me. You can post the comments below. And then C part. Impulses travel within the neuron through electrical impulses, and explain how impulses travel in between the neuron. I would just like to have a conversation about this question. This question has been, a kind of a center of attraction of the papers from the past 3 years, because this question comes up in different forms. Like 2 years before, this question came in the form of Parkinson's disease. That they have shown two particular diagrams. In Parkinson's, the number of vesicles was less. In the other one, in the normal one, the number of vesicles was okay. So they wanted to compare between them. So just understand this thing, that when the neurotransmitters they move between the neuron, they actually finally these impulses from the neurons are going to the effector. As you already know, that an effector can be a gland or a muscle. So imagine that you are basically thinking in your brain that you have to move your hand, and your hand muscles at that time are the effector. Now imagine the same condition in a person who is suffering from Parkinson's. So in Parkinson's, there are less neurotransmitters will be released in the gap, less neurotransmitters will bind, less impulses will flow in the neurons, and less impulses will be transferred to the effector, which will lead to less contraction of the muscle, and the movement becomes slow. That's what you had to explain in the Parkinson's disease question. Now, I'm giving you an overview of this process. So if any kind of questions from here comes up in your exam, you'll be able to write it down. I have included all the points which are related to this particular part. So the question is, explain how impulses travel in between two neurons. So first of all, neurotransmitter filled vesicles fuse with the presynaptic neuron membrane. Okay, I'll draw a quick diagram so that you're able to understand it. So this is your first neuron, okay, presynaptic neuron. This is your postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so as the impulses they reach here, this one. So as the impulses they reach here, okay, here neurotransmitter filled vesicles are they actually fuse with this membrane. These neurotransmitters are released in the gap, and finally there are receptors present on the postsynaptic neuron. So these neurotransmitters they actually diffuse through the gap and bind to these receptors. So this process, when they bind with the receptors, actually you have to also understand this, that these receptor here are proteins, and they are complementary to the neurotransmitters. So only specific neurotransmitters will bind with the receptors, and once they bind here, the impulse is carried in the next neuron. So this entire process you have to explain here, which I have written here. So first of all, neurotransmitter-filled vesicles fuse with the presynaptic neuron. Neurotransmitters are released in the synaptic gap. They diffuse in the gap and bind to the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. This causes impulses to be generated in the next neuron. Receptors are complementary to the neurotransmitters. If you write this much, you are good enough for 6 marks. Don't worry about that. Although this question is of 5 marks, but I wanted to give more detailing of this question so that if any kind of question comes up, you will be in a position to do it very well. Okay, so moving ahead with the second question. A group of students investigated the digestion of fat in milk. They added an alkaline solution to the milk. They divided the milk into four test tubes. they added lipase bile salts to some of the test tubes as shown in table 5.1. They did this at the same time for each test tube. They kept all the test tube at 40 degrees. After 5 minutes, they added the universal indicator solution to each test tube. Okay, so this is A, B, C, D. In A, you have milk alkaline solution, lipase, bile salts. In B, you have milk alkaline solution, bile salts, and water. In C, you have milk alkaline solution, lipase, and water. And D, you have milk alkaline solution and water, no lipase and no bile. Figure shows the color of the indicator at different pH values. So if the pH changes here, so it is going to change the color. Okay. Also, I would like to give you one information. Many of the students, they ask that why is alkaline solution added here? Because the lipase which would be acting in this condition would require a alkaline pH. That's why. Now, explain why test tube D was included in the investigation. So, test tube D had milk, alkaline solution, and water, no lipase, no bile. So, why D was included in the investigation was D was acting as a control to basically show that lipase is responsible for the chemical digestion of fat. Yeah, lipase is responsible for the breakdown of fat in the milk. That's what I have written here. Double I. Explain why the color in the test tube A was orange. Why the color in the test tube A was orange? It's because in test tube A, let's just scroll up, I'll explain it here. So test tube A had milk, alkaline solution, lipase, and bile salts. So just to inform you, bile salts will do what? They will do emulsification. They will break down the large fat globules like this into smaller fat globules. Okay, and when they break down the large fat globules into smaller fat globules, this is going to increase the surface area of these molecules for lipase activity. And quickly, lipase is going to break down these fats into your fatty acids and glycerol. When fatty acids are produced, they are going to lower down the pH and it is going to cause the pH to become orange. And that's the same thing I have written here. The test tube A has lipase and bile. Bile emulsifies fat. Lipase breaks down fat into fatty acids and glycerol. Fatty acids reduce the pH and cause the color to change. Explain the results for test tube B and C. So they are just asking you to compare the results of B and C. So let's just have a quick review of what B and C have. B has bile and doesn't have lipase. C has lipase, doesn't have bile. So what I have written here is that, sorry, test tube B has no lipase, so there is no fatty acids formation and no color change due to no pH change. So everything is depending on the pH change, and because there is no lipase here, exactly there's not going to be any fatty acid formation. Similarly, if we talk about test tube C, there is no emulsification because there is no bile, so there is no emulsification, but still there is lipase. So the lipase is going to break down the fats, although the activity of lipase here is going to be lower. So this is what you have to write here. So the lipase activity is lower, so the less fatty acid are formed. Okay. B part. Now, I would like to tell you about this question. This question comes in different forms. Like quite recently, I think in 2023 paper, there was a question where it was asking you that why lipase will not bind with proteins. Why? Because lipase is an enzyme which is specific for only lipids or fats. And lipase will only bind with what? Lipase will only bind with your fats to form an enzyme substrate complex. And you can also say that the active site of lipase will only be complementary to fats or lipids, but not proteins. And the same 3 points I have written here. So whatever type of question it comes from there related to enzyme binding, you can use these points. Okay. Enzymes have a specific 3D shape. Explain why the shape of an enzyme is important. Enzymes have an active site which is complementary to the shape of substrate. Enzyme binds with only specific substrate. Substrate will bind with enzyme on active site to form enzyme substrate complex. So these 3 points are very, very crucial points for enzyme. First, the active site is complementary to the shape of substrate. It is specific for substrate and it will only bind with a specific substrate to form enzyme substrate complex. Question number 3. Question number 3A. Complete table 4.1 to show the letter and the name of each of the structure that form these function. So I'll just scroll up. Is a diagram of human female reproductive system. Okay. So you have to write the sites for release of estrogen, site of fertilization, implantation, and sperm deposition. I'll go up and explain all of them. So starting from the first one, where estrogen is produced in the ovaries. During normal non-pregnancy time, every time estrogen is going to be produced by F, that is ovaries. But during pregnancy, it is mainly produced by placenta. Okay. Then here you have E. E is your wall of endometrium or uterus wall or spongy lining of the uterus. This is where exactly implantation will take place. So for implantation, E. Then where the sperms will be deposited, the sperms will be deposited in C. And the last part of the question is that the site of implantation, I told you, site of fertilization. Site of fertilization is the fallopian tubes or the oviduct, which is your A. Okay, so this is the entire answer. Now, next part is really easy and straightforward. Fertilization is the fusion of the nuclei of male gamete and a female gamete resulting in a zygote. State the number of chromosomes present in a human. Female gamete 23, zygote 46. Okay, so female gamete is haploid N, that is 23, and zygote is diploid, that is 2N is equal to 46. Okay. Chlamydia is a sexually transmitted infection, STI. It is caused by a bacterium, Chlamydia trachomatis. Figure 4.2 shows the number of reported cases of chlamydia in females in each age group in one country. So this is the number of cases, and this is the graph which is showing you the number of cases in one country and in females. Describe the results shown by the data in 4.2. I try to keep it as simple as I can. So what I've written here is that the number of cases, they increase from 10 to 19 years, and from 20 to you can say 54 years they start to decrease. So the number of cases increase from 10 to 19 years and then decreases from 20 to 54 years. It peaks at 15 to 19 years at this. Because it is a describe question, you only have to describe the graph. No explanation is required. Use the values, you will get extra marks for that. So that is why it peaks at 15 to 19 years, this much. No cases from 55 to 65 plus, and steep decline from 20 to 24 onwards. Okay, so these points I've included. Definitely this is more than 3 marks. Okay. D part. Chlamydia is caused by a bacterium. Suggest a treatment for chlamydia. So what is the treatment? Antibiotic. State the name of one other STI, HIV. If you want to know one more, gonorrhea, syphilis, all these you can write. Okay. Hepatitis B also. Triple I. Complete the sentences about the spread of STIs. STI are transmitted through the transfer of contaminated body fluids. During sexual contact, one way individual can avoid the spread of STI is to use the type of your barrier contraception. One example of this type of contraception is condoms. Okay, so this question was there in a recent paper. So don't think that this question is out of syllabus or something like that. These are like general questions which you need to know to avoid STI. And you have HIV in your syllabus, which is your STI. So you need to know how to avoid basically sexually transmitted infections. Outline 2 ways in which spread of STI can be reduced. So how you can control STI from spreading. So first, having avoid unknown sexual partners, use of condom, educating people, testing before blood transfusion, because they spread from body fluids or contaminated body fluids. That is why you have to test the blood transfusion also, because it can spread from blood transfusions also. So these are the ways to control them. Fourth question. The 4 o'clock plant, Mirabilis jalapa, can have flowers of 3 different colors. as shown in figure 4.1. So there is crimson flower, orange, red, and yellow flower. Okay, this question is about codominance. So when the crimson flowers, that is already like red flowers, and yellow flowers, they are crossed with each other, what you get is orange red flowers. So a student crossed some crimson flowered plants with some yellow flowered plants, cross one. She collected the seeds and grew them. All the plants that grew from these seeds had orange red flowers. So that is an example of codominance. Why? Because neither of the parents is basically showing up in the next generation. It is a totally different phenotype, which is a combination of both the parents. So that is why it is called as your codominant, because in this a totally different phenotype is produced. So here for crimson flowers, it is AC. For yellow flowers, it is AY. Another one way to show that it is codominance is because both of them are represented by capital letters. If we are talking about dominant and recessive, then we represent them dominant by capital letters, recessive by small letters. So you cross them, okay, you get this genotype and this is your phenotype. There is a higher chance that inheritance questions might come up in this paper also. Okay. B. Flower color in M. jalapa is produced by protein pigment called carotenoids. Explain in brief how these carotenoids are produced in plants. Okay. So this is how protein basically are produced, or this is the answer related to proteins. And this is, and I have tried to write the maximum points. If this question comes up for 4 marks or even 5 marks, you can include this answer. So first of all, a copy of carotenoid gene is made in the form of mRNA, that is 1 mark. mRNA moves out of the nucleus, that is going to be 1 mark on the ribosome included, okay? Ribosomes assemble, that's going to be 1 mark. Then they join the amino acid, that's going to be 1 mark based on the sequence of mRNA. So if you write this much, definitely you will get full marks in your answer, okay? C. Farmers grow tall wheat plants to ensure good yield. Tall height is dominant over recessive. How will a farmer ensure that a plant is homozygous dominant before crossing it for producing other varieties? Normally, so I'll explain how it basically works. Okay, look here. So there are tall height is dominant over recessive, and the farmer wants to ensure that the plant should be homozygous dominant. So there are two possible genotypes for tall, this and this. Okay, both of them, when you look externally on their phenotype, both of them are going to appear tall, but the farmer wants to have only homozygous, that means this one and not this one, to when he is breeding them. Okay, so how will we ensure it? We have to cross it with the dwarf parent. Okay, so when we cross it with the dwarf parent, in the first case, okay, let's say this one. So if we cross it with the this one and this one, in that case we are going to get this. Okay, and progeny is going to be all dominant, all tall. Okay, but suppose if we cross it with the other one, I don't have time, so let's say this one. Okay, so if we cross this one and this one, in that case, the progeny is going to be this and this. That means 50% of them are going to be tall and 50% of them are going to be dwarf. So this is, it basically tells us that this organism, the parent plant, was actually heterozygous. So this is what I have written in the third point. So this type of cross, when you cross it with the dwarf parent, it is always called as what? Test cross. When you cross any organism with the dwarf parent, it is called as what? Test cross. This question has also come up for 1 mark. Crossing with the recessive parent is called as test cross. And if the progeny is all tall, parent is homozygous. And if it is 50% tall and 50% dwarf, it is heterozygous. So you can explain it in the third point. Okay, moving ahead. Flowers from M. jalapa were cross-pollinated. Explain the difference between self-pollination and cross-pollination. So self-pollination is when there is a transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of same plant. Cross is when it is from different plant of same species. This is important to mention, that you mention different plant from same species. Some species of plants are self-pollinated. Discuss the advantages of self-pollination over cross-pollination. So self-pollination requires only one plant, requires only one parent plant, no external pollinator is required, no nectar is produced, and less pollen grains are wasted and produced. So these all points you can write for self-pollination. Self-pollination also, basically in self-pollination, if we talk about one disadvantage, here it produces less genetic variation, which decreases your adaptability to changing environment because there is less variability in the genes. There's genetic variation. Moving ahead with the next question. Question number 5. Exercise that occurs over a longer period of time than weightlifting often involves aerobic respiration as well as anaerobic respiration. Figure shows the oxygen consumption by an athlete during and after a 5,000-meter race. So this is the graph. The question is, describe the athlete's oxygen consumption during and after the race as shown in figure 4.2. You will gain credit for using the figures in the graph to support your answer. So during and after, again, I'm repeating this thing that here you just have to include the data. You don't have to include anything else here. You just have to include the data of the graph because it's a describe question, not an explain question. No oxygen depth, nothing that is required here. Okay. So first thing which I have written here is that oxygen consumption increases from this point to this point rapidly. It stays higher during the exercise, and then after the exercise what I've written is it comes down to here, which is like 27.5, and then stays to normal again. So this is what I've included in my answer. The rate of oxygen consumption increases when the race starts to 2.2 dm³ minute at 9 minutes. So it rapidly increases at 9 minutes. It stays constant till the race ends at 15 minutes. So it stays constant till that particular time, till 18 minutes here. Okay. Then what I have written here is it decreases gradually to 0.5 dm³ per minute at 27.5 minutes and stays constant. So describing data here and here, there are separate marks, and explaining them is separate mark. Explaining the data, not anything else. Okay. So this thing. Explain how this change during exercise is coordinated, why the oxygen consumption does not return back to normal immediately after the exercise is finished. So there is a lot of things which you can write in this answer, and I have written a very big answer because this is one of the most trending questions which has been come up. And if this question comes in your exam, I want you all to get full marks in this. No compromise, okay? So increased muscle contraction. Basically, what happens here is there is increased muscle contraction during exercise, which causes increased aerobic respiration. More CO2 is produced in the blood, which causes the blood pH to decrease. This is detected by the brain. Brain is going to send signals to the heart and to the lungs. The lungs to contract faster, like the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles, as well as the heart to beat faster. So this is going to happen, and all of this is done to remove the faster removal of CO2 and faster supply of oxygen. But still, if there is less concentration of oxygen, what will happen? Anaerobic respiration, which will produce what? Lactic acid. And this lactic acid has to be transported to the liver in blood plasma. So, in case you don't know it, it travels in the blood plasma to the liver. Then, what actually happens is this is broken down by aerobic respiration in the liver. But where is that extra oxygen for this going to come up? This is called as your oxygen depth. So when you stop your activity, like the person stopped the activity here, but immediately after this, it is not coming back to normal. It is taking time. So this time actually from here to here, this is your oxygen depth. Okay, oxygen depth, which you took in the form of anaerobic respiration and produced lactic acid. So this oxygen which you're going to breathe inside is going to be used to break down lactic acid in the liver after you stop your exercise. So this is what I've explained here. Though I have not mentioned the oxygen depth, you can write that also. But I think this is more than enough for 5 to 6 marks. Okay, moving moving ahead to question number 6. This question is about transport in plants. Two pea plants, D and E, were supplied with substances containing radioactive isotope C14 or phosphorus 32 as shown in figure 4.1. A leaf of plant D was exposed to radioactive carbon dioxide. Plant E was placed into a solution containing radioactive phosphate ions. After several hours, the plant were analyzed for the presence of radioactive isotope. Sucrose containing C14 was found throughout plant D. Compounds containing P32 were found throughout plant E. Complete table 4.1 to show the tissue in which each substance is transported, one possible sink for each substance. So this is P plant, D and E. Transported substance transported sucrose. So as we know that the tissue which transports sucrose is phloem, the sink can be your roots because phloem is basically going to transport sucrose from source to sink. Source can be your leaves at this time, assuming that the plant is doing photosynthesis. So that means it is the source and roots can be the sink. Then E here is basically talking to you about your phosphorus, phosphate ions, and the transport tissue for ions, as you know, is xylem, and xylem transports ion only in one direction from the roots to the upper parts of the plant or aerial parts of the plant, like leaves. You can write stem, you can also write flowers, all that structures. Okay. B part. State one substance other than sucrose that is produced in leaves and translocated to other parts of the plant. So, other than sucrose, what is transported in phloem is your amino acids. Xylem transports water and mineral ions. Phloem transports sucrose and amino acids. Now, I have tried to do the maximum I can in this question. So, if a question related to source and sink comes up, you can write the full answer which is given in C. Explain how sucrose can be transported in phloem upwards and downwards. So when plant is able to do photosynthesis, leaves are acting as the source and roots are acting as the sink. Sucrose is transported down from source to sink. When plant is not able to do photosynthesis, roots are acting as source and leaves are acting as sink, and sucrose is transported upwards. So when the plant is able to do photosynthesis, the leaves are producing glucose and they are acting as the source, as well as when the plant is not able to photosynthesize, and maybe at that time the glucose or is stored in the form of starch in the roots, and that in the form of sucrose is transported in phloem to the growing parts like the growing stem, growing leaves, growing shoot. Okay. D part. State two uses of water within a pea plant. Uses of water, we can write many. So transport ions dissolved in xylem, site for metabolic reactions in cytoplasm, and photosynthesis. All these reactions, they involve water in plants. For humans also, you can write that water is a part of blood plasma. It's the site for metabolic reactions in the cytoplasm. And also water is useful for excretion of your urea and excess salts in the sweat as well as in urine. So these examples you can write for humans also, and this is the question related to plants right now. Okay. Question number 7. Figure shows the Calayan rail, Garryalis caliensis, a flightless bird that lives in Calayan Island in the Philippines. This species of bird was discovered in 2004. State the name of the genus of the Calayan rail. So the genus here, as the name is given here, Gallerus. So Gallerus is going to be the answer. Okay. Many bird species are threatened by deforestation. Suggest three reasons why deforestation occurs. So deforestation can occur by why do we basically cut down forest? There can be multiple answers related to that, and you'll be lucky if this question comes up. To grow crops, to build houses, to obtain food, paper for mining. C. Suggest the likely effects of deforestation on the population of the bird species. So bird species will have habitat loss, there will be fewer nest sites, more exposed to predators, and more competition for food. So these are the likely causes for decrease in the bird population. D part. So the D part now. Okay. Some species of birds, such as the Calayan rail, are endangered. Outline the reasons why it is important to conserve a species. Why do you think that we would be interested in conserving any species, any random species which is present in the nature? The reason behind this is when you basically if one species is endangered, that species might be serving as a source of food for other species also. So each species dependent on the others, so less food for the predators of the Calayan rail. So those who are the predators for this particular organism, they will have less food, and in turn their population will also decrease. So it's a kind of an imbalance which will be created in the food chain, and it will result in many of the species getting extinct. So that will overall, it will cause the biodiversity losses. So based on that only I have written my answer. It will cause imbalance in the food chain. If this person, like if this species is getting extinct, then there will be an imbalance in the food chain to maintain biodiversity, and each species is dependent on the others, so for predators of the Kalayan rail. So these are the reasons why you need to conserve any specific species. So these are the common points which you can write for other species also. Okay, this is for Kalayan rail, but it can be for other organisms also. Okay, so now I have completed my second paper. I hope whatever I said to you in my last video, that you have to read the questions properly, answer them properly. Every question that comes in the IGCSE exam is totally application based, okay? Many of the questions are direct also, but most of the questions that we have in the exam are basically application based. The thing is, you just have to read the questions properly. They might be a little twisted and turned, but that will not stop you from getting the desired marks that you have in your mind or desired grades that you have in your mind. The only thing is, just be focused in that very moment. Just be focused in the paper in that very hour. Give your best and let everything fall in place. Okay? All the very best for your exam. Hoping you do well and get all the A stars. Thank you so much. Have a great day.